from the Spirit with glorious light. Confidence living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about how we can ease depression. Depression is something that all of us face. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that our mind controls everything that has to do with us. We believe it controls the way that we view life, the way that we feel about life. It controls our physical body. It controls the way that we perceive the world. It controls the way that we perceive the people around us. One of the things that we say so often is that we live in our mind and not in the world. That means that the way that you think, the way that I think, determines the fiber and the quality of our being. We also believe that God, who is infinite intelligence, has what we call divine mind, and that everything that is in the mind of God is accessible to you and me as we connect our mind with divine mind, as we connect our thinking with divine thinking or divine thought. We believe that these are practical ways in which we can enrich our lives. They may sound new to you, and it may sound strange even that you can connect spirituality with the dynamics of mind, but it is a truth, and it is a workable circumstance and situation, and it is a technique that has been employed by many, many people for many, many centuries. The reality is that the powers of mind control everything that we are, everything that we do, and everything that we are going to be. And that as we connect our mind with divine mind, we open ourselves to the knowledge of infinite intelligence and the guidance and direction that we need in our daily lives. But from time to time, we're faced with challenges and difficulties, and one of those challenges and difficulties that visit almost all of us is depression. Some people are troubled with it more than others. Some are clinically depressed, where they need constant supervision, psychointervention, and psychotherapy and help to deal with their depression. But for most of us, depression comes and goes, and it comes and goes for a variety of reasons. It comes because of the way that we think about life, or more importantly, because of the way that we think life ought to be versus the way it is. Depression comes because life isn't the way we had anticipated it, because of the things that people say or fail to say or do or fail to do. All kinds of things contribute to these periods of depression. Some of us are visited less with depression. Others are visited with depression many, many times, or a good deal of the time. So I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about some ways in which you can employ some simple spiritual techniques of mind science, the dynamic of mind, to dealing with the reality of depression. And when I talk to you about mind science, I'm not talking about your changing your religion or changing your faith tradition. I'm simply telling you that in New Thought, metaphysical philosophy, in our faith tradition, we have some techniques that are useful to all people, regardless of their faith or religious tradition. And so these are not in conflict with what you believe, but they may be in conflict with what you thought that you believed. And so we suggest these to you as practical ideas for dealing with your daily life and employing a spirituality that can interrelate and interface faith with whatever it is your belief system is. So I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about ways to deal with depression. One of the first ways that we can deal with depression is to get some physical exercise. And of course, physicians and psychologists have told us for a long time that the mind-body connection is so important. And so if you are depressed, if you are sad, but particularly if you find yourself being depressed from time to time, it's really important that you have some physical exercise, that you get up and move around. And one of the most magnificent and easy ways that almost all of us can employ is simply walking. And we talk about walking away from depression. And it doesn't mean at all that you can walk away from the depression, because the depression, of course, comes with you. But as you walk away, get up and move. If you live in a confined area and don't feel safe or don't feel that you'd like to go outside, you can get up and walk around where you are. But the best situation is to get up and walk around outside. Maybe it's just on your street or around the block. If you're not in a location where you can do that, go to a safe place, a park or some location where you can walk, and do it on a regular basis. As you walk, Allow your thoughts to wander, but allow your thoughts not to focus upon your depression. This walking time or walking away from depression, or as psychologists now call it, walking therapy, is a wonderful precursor or beginning to the cleansing process. Some people are even conditioned enough that they walk every day or several times during the week, and this is a wonderful activity. And it doesn't require great physical endurance. Walk at whatever distance and whatever pace that you can, but begin to walk. If we think about people of other generations that were seemingly more healthy than we always think about the fact that they walked. People also identify walking with thinking or with conversing, because very often we'll say to someone, come walk with me while we talk about this circumstance or situation. And simply moving the body does some wonderful and positive things. It begins to stimulate us from a physical standpoint, which then stimulates us further from a mental standpoint, which also moves to stimulate us from a spiritual standpoint. The second thing that we need to do is to change our environment. And when I talk about changing environment, I don't mean pack your bags and move, nor do I mean taking a vacation, although those might be good ideas for some people. Most of us are not free enough to change our environment every time we get depressed. But we are free to change our immediate environment, especially if we are in periods of long periods or recurring periods of depression. And by changing our environment, we can do some simple things. We can move the furniture. We can rearrange the pictures. We can change the way that we do things. We can eat in a different seat or a different location in the house. We can go out to eat lunch or dinner once or twice a week. Whatever it is that you can do to change your environment, to get out of your routine, because so often we're in a routine that sets us and locks us. And of course, what we're talking about in changing our environment, as we move the furniture around, sit in different chairs, eat meals in different locations, rearrange the pictures, change our schedule, we're talking again about some dynamic activity. And this activity moves us and calls us into a different mental and physical and spiritual state. The third thing that we need to do is to feed our thoughts, and feed our thoughts with healthy thoughts that empower us and strengthen us. One of the great and easy ways is to read. If you're depressed by reading the newspaper, don't read the newspaper. Read a book or a magazine that entertains you, and bring your thoughts into a different mode, away from the things that have caused you the depression. Read some things that you've never read before. If you're a spiritual person, meditate more, pray more, but do it in a different time, do it out of your routine, so that anything that can change your physical and mental state and your spiritual clock is going to be good for you. The fourth empowering thing that we can all do to deal with depression is to seek humor. Whatever it is that makes you laugh, look for that. I'm constantly amazed as I talk and counsel with people when I ask them, when was the last time you laughed? Not just a little giggle or a little snicker and laugh, but when was the last time that you really, really laughed? And so often people will tell me, I can't remember when the last time was that I really laughed. Or it was 6 months ago or 3 months ago. My goodness, we need humor in our lives. And we especially need humor in our lives if we tend to be depressed people, if we tend to go through periods of melancholy and sadness. So seek out humor. What is it that has brought you humor in the past? Again, it doesn't have to be a dynamic or expensive thing. Maybe there's a television program. Maybe there's an old Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. Maybe there's a book. Maybe it's Marmaduke in the newspaper. Whatever it is, bring some humor into your life and look for ways in which you can laugh and enjoy life. If you don't have those and have never had them, then seek them out. Find something that can bring humor into your life. The fifth thing that we need to do is to build upon the positive aspects of our life. Many times we begin to think that this is wrong and that's wrong, my job is awful, my home life is bad, my relationship's not so good, my kids do this, and on we go in our minds, thinking and articulating the things that are wrong or that are negative in our lives. Sit down and write out the things that are positive in your life. If you can't come up with a dozen or two things that are positive in your life, then begin a mental exercise of building positive things in your life. If you don't have humor in your life, decide how it is you're going to get that humor in your life and make that a positive affirmation or something that moves you into a positive way. But sit down and list the positive things in your life. If that list is very small or you can't come up with many things that are positive, then you need to redirect your thinking. You need to redirect your life, and you need to decide today, in the midst of the depression, the sadness, and the melancholy, that you need positive aspects of your life. There are positive things in your life and positive things about yourself. Whether you see them or know them in your conscious mind, they are there. Seek them out, write them down, articulate them, and embrace them. The sixth thing that we can do in the midst of our depression, and these are all simple, practical things that we can do, is to do something for someone else. So often when we're depressed, we're in the midst of ourselves, and we become so me-conscious and me-aware. And certainly we need to think of ourselves, but we also need to think of others. Seek out someone else that you can do something nice for. Make a telephone call, write a note, take someone to lunch, invite someone to go for a walk with you. Do something for someone else that makes them feel good and makes you feel good. The next thing that we need to do in dealing with depression really has to do with this issue of activity, and that is that we need to set aside times of relaxation and recreation. And recreation means to do something that recreates you. Recreation is recreation. For some people, it may be going to the park or playing golf or doing something, jogging a mile. It may, for some people, be very serious physical exertion. But recreation can also be something much more passive. It can be watching something or knitting something or sewing something or cooking something. But the importance is that we have regular periods of recreation in our lives, regular periods to move ourselves and do something that we really like to do, that we really enjoy doing, whether it's stamp collecting, whatever it is. Do something that you enjoy doing. And again, if you don't have anything that you can do or that you can think of that you enjoy, that's a problem. That identifies to you the fact that you're a candidate for depression and that your thinking is not properly aligned with the dynamic and positive thoughts and the thought process of the divine and the infinite and that which we call divine mind. The last and most important thing that we can do in dealing with the depression is to know that God loves us. God loves you and God loves me, and that we are seemingly separated from God. Some of us have been taught that we're separated from God. Some of us have studied and come to believe that we're separated from God. We are not separated from God, and we are not separated from our brothers and sisters who surround us, all of humanity. We are in union with God. We are in unity with that divine principle. And in the midst of your depression, your sadness, and your melancholy, draw upon that resource. Affirm the fact that you are united with the presence and the power of God, and that God loves you no matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what you failed to do. The Spirit and the power of God welcomes you and embraces you. And whether you acknowledge it or claim it or not, that presence and that power is always in the midst of where you are. You are a perfect and whole child of God. And as you change your way of thinking by connecting your mind with divine mind, you will come to a fuller and richer understanding of your person and your role as that perfect child of God. We believe in prayer and meditation as centering forces. We'd like to invite you at this point in the program to pause with us for a moment of prayer and reflection. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the remembrance of others. And we know that as we remember others, your presence lives out more dynamically in us and through us. And so as we join in this prayer, we open ourselves to release the depressions of life, to release the hurts and the pains, and to open ourselves to your divine and holy presence. We know these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. These things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
If we could all follow those suggestions you just made, we would certainly be far ahead in life.
Well, I hope so. You know, I think the important thing to remember is that everybody gets depressed from time to time. Now, I'm fortunate because I rarely get depressed, but I know so many people who are depressed a great deal of the time. And I think, you know, these simple practical means of dealing with depression are just tremendous, and I think that they would help people a lot. One of the first things that we talked about, of course, was walking, and we've talked about that before. You're a walker.
Yes, I walk every morning. Well, not every morning, about 4 or 5 mornings a week, and I walk for an hour. And doctors are saying that if we get a half hour of exercise, good, sturdy walking, 3 days a week, it makes a big difference in our lives.
Mhm. And I think that also when people are depressed, and I think too, when we talk about depression, we also ought to make clear that we're talking about people who just feel a little sad or
Yes,
feel a little melancholy, because so
yes,
many people feel this period, have these periods of sadness, and then they go into real depressions. And so if they're able to deal with it at the early stages, but beginning to walk and let those things process in their walk. And one of the things that I spoke of was the technique that psychologists are using today, which they call walking therapy, which is to walk away from the problem
hmm,
and begin in the walking to deal with self-talk and also to deal objectively with what the problem is. And I think when we're depressed, we may not know what the problem is. It's just something. Really a culmination of many things that cause many people to be depressed. So they can't really say it's what she said or what he did. Instead, it's that I'm so depressed about life. I'm so
yes.
depressed about everything. And so this walking begins the process.
Yes, it gets us out of ourselves, as you said, and it helps us to, if we will deep breathe when we're walking too, consciously do deep breathing,
Mhm.
it makes a big difference. And that's where the runners and the joggers have the end that they do deep breathe by necessity. But when we walk, we sometimes forget. We have to remind ourselves too. But that deep breathing does more for us than anything because it opens up, it just opens us up to
Mhm.
God's own energy. And another thing, there's all kinds of depression, as you pointed out, and we have to do all we can to get over our own depression. And then if we can't, then we need to seek a doctor's help to see if it's something systemic that we need to change. And some people have chronic depression and they have to have drugs. But I think that first we need to test our own means and watch what food we're eating. Very often we might be allergic to a food and it would cause us to be depressed. And another thing, if we eat too many sweets, it will cause people to be depressed. I have friends who, when they overindulge in sweet and sugar, well, they're very depressed the next day. And they know that, and yet they keep right on eating a lot of sweets. And I probably would too. If I got depressed, I probably would just keep right on. Like you, I'm fortunate that I don't really have much depression in my life. And there's been times when I faced great problems and crises in life, and then I would be depressed, but I would do something about it, and it would pass. But we need to know ourselves. We need to know what it is that's causing the depression. Is it something that we've eaten or that we need supplements in our bodies extra? Is it because someone has said something and made us touchy? Usually that's because we're not feeling up to par, or we would just laugh it off if someone said something that made us feel bad.
Mhm. And then at its core, of course, is the issue of self-esteem. And so
Yes,
many people have such a low self-esteem. And of course, the big issue of one of the primary issues of New Thought is to build our self-esteem and to build the self-esteem of every living being,
yes.
especially those who have come through whatever means to believe themselves lesser than other persons.
Hmm. Well, very often it begins in childhood, but of course, I think everything that begins in childhood begins in another lifetime, and we bring through a certain propensity for certain things because we're supposed to work through that problem in this given lifetime. Because you and I both know people who have had terrible childhoods. They've been abandoned, they've been abused, they've been all sorts of things, and yet they come out just really vibrant and healthy and strong, and others just let it drag them down. So we're responsible for our own happiness and our own lives.
Absolutely. And that important analogy is there in that we can be faced with horrible depressions or horrible circumstances of life, and one person can deal with it so beautifully, and another person can deal with it in totally the opposite way. And it has to do with the conditioning of the mind and the conditioning of the spiritual and mental person that calls this reality into being. And I think it's really important that anybody who has a low sense of self-esteem, has a troubled childhood, a difficult past, has depression and sadness and all of melancholy and all of the things that go along with it, can help that circumstance by dealing with the way that they think about it. Now, I think it is eminently important, and you said that very beautifully. And I think we have to really impress upon people that there are people who are clinically depressed,
Yeah.
and those people need help,
Yeah.
professional help.
Yeah.
But certainly a place to begin is with your church or with your counselors and with the people who can begin to assess the problem with you and help you through it if you're not able to do it yourself. And I think if people are faced with depression that doesn't seem to go away and that they're not able to deal with, they need to share it with someone else. And then that needs to be shared to the highest level in terms of getting professional help if we're dealing with clinical depression, which could very well have to do, as you
Yeah.
said, with physiological problems, with physical problems of the body.
Mhm.
And so we're talking about people like most of us who are depressed from time to time, or who may be depressed for a period of hours or a day or so. I think if your depression runs for longer periods than that, you need to assess it very readily in terms of whether you need help. You
Yes.
need outside help.
And then get the outside help as
Yes.
we need it. I know as our bodies change too as we age, as we grow older, and we don't have to grow what we consider to be old because we are as young as we think. And I don't mean being kittenish and doing things that are foolish to try and look younger or seem younger, but just if we think youthfully, then we act youthfully and we are youthful. And we have to keep our bodies cleansed and the toxins moving out of our bodies. And as you pointed out, walking or some other type of exercise is the best way to eliminate those toxins from the body, because the body toxins are eliminated by way of the ductless glands, and the ductless glands just have the inner openings. And if those toxins stay in the body, then and if our intestines aren't cleansed from time to time, if they're backed up, then we're going to have toxins getting loose in all our throughout our body, and then we are going to be depressed because we're not going to. It affects our minds.
Mhm. Very important that our physical bodies have to work properly
Yes.
in order to deal with the avoidance of depression.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the way our physical bodies work properly is being careful what we put into them, so that we're not eating food or beverage that to which we're allergic, or too much of one thing that's detrimental, like fats and sweets. But we can have a little bit of everything. But if we overdo on any one thing, then we often get into trouble.
Right. And then, of course, we need to eliminate the toxins from our thinking.
Yes,
And of
exactly.
course, that's fundamental to what we teach all the time, because we have toxic thoughts.
Yes, that's right. And if we indulge in those, then they just back up in our system, just as the physical toxins do. Isn't it interesting that it's all goes back to one thing: self-responsibility?
All at the core is
Yes.
self-responsibility. And I think as we accept responsibility for ourselves and the way that we feel and the state of our health, both physical, spiritual, and mental, we also are invited to share that with others.
Yes.
And we can readily see people, and all of us can see people who are the picture of radiant health,
Yes.
or the picture of mental health or spiritual health. And that comes about by living the principles that we talk about so freely.
Yes, and putting our faith and trust in Supreme Creator, and whatever our religion is, we can still believe in that Supreme Creator and know that we are responsible to that one only, and to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can't control the lives of other people. We can't control what they think or do, but we can just accept that they're that we are responsible for ourselves and they're responsible for themselves.
That issue of control is very misunderstood, I think, because we so often want to control everything.
Yes.
And in reality, we find that when we give up control,
Yes.
then we are really in control.
Yes.
Which seems very difficult to understand, but it's a simple principle, as you know.
Yes, isn't it? And all we can really control is our own passions, our own appetites, our own thoughts. And we can control our thoughts better if we control what we put into our bodies, and also give our bodies exercise. There are exercise programs people can do too at home. If they don't want to go out to a gym, then they can work out a program so that they do a certain body exercises each day.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing for walking, some people get depressed just walking alone. So then find a walking partner and have someone to walk with or jog with. And I know there are many businessmen who belong to businessmen's groups and they jog together.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are others who just like to be alone. That's their time to be alone because they're going to be with people all day. So we have to know ourselves, know what it is that makes us feel best, and then honor ourselves.
honor ourselves, and in that we need to exercise. We need to also have the humor that we talked about.
Yes.
Very important, because I'm surprised at how often people tell me they haven't laughed.
Yes. When we all laugh at ourselves, if we really are healthy and strong, we laugh at ourselves. And I don't know about you, I'm sure you do laugh at yourself. I find a lot of things to laugh at myself about because we do some weird things.
We do, and we need to see that in ourselves, and we need to also see it outside. We need to find some things that are truly enjoyable to
Yeah.
us. And this issue of recreation, and so many people don't have any kind of recreation or any kind of enjoyment in life. And I'm also surprised at how many people do things that they believe is recreation when in fact it's drudgery. You know, I've heard people tell me that they used to love to cook,
Uh-huh.
and now they don't love to cook anymore, and their family expects them to cook, so they continue to cook, and they use the cooking as their recreation, but it's not enjoyable. Well, that ceased to be recreation now, and a person in that situation needs to assess, should I be cooking, or should I
Yes.
tell my family, there was a time when I enjoyed making muffins and cookies, but now in my life I don't choose to do that any longer. Those kinds of things. I think just because we enjoyed something at one point doesn't mean we have to enjoy it at another point. I remember a story of someone who once told me that they were at a dinner and they mentioned that they loved hot soup. And so for years, people would then bring them soup, and if it wasn't hot enough, would take it away and bring it back. And for years, they had endured this hot soup issue. And they told me several yeyears ago, I acquired a taste, and I didn't much care for hot soup any longer. And yet, everyone was still building upon that thought process.
And not really being observant, not allowing them to change. And change is so important. Change is inevitable, and we need to welcome change. And we need to look for ways we can change.
Absolutely. And as we look for ways that we can change, we need to change the way that we feel about depression and melancholy and sadness. And we need to look to new ways that can empower and strengthen us. And Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you some concepts and ideas in confident living. We hope that you found them useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
With glorious light, confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand.